today's world, sex and masturbation are the preferred pleasures of the masses. It is thought of by most as harmless, natural, or even healthy. Centuries of research in biology, however, seems to say otherwise. Reproduction is a drain. It weakens the body, shortens life, and steals the very energy that makes a man strong, intelligent, and masculine. Aristotle knew this, as did the physicians of old. Modern science confirms it. Look around. The men who chase lust without restraint age faster, bald sooner, and burn out their life force in ways most people are oblivious to. And yet we are told this is normal, natural, and to be celebrated. It is not. It is a theft of life itself. And in this video, I'm going to show you why, and how you can take back the energy that society has been telling you to waste. Before you were born, you were a mere seed of your father. Before your father's birth, he was a mere seed of his father. Your life and everything in it originated from the seed of your father within the womb of your mother. While the body is born and eventually dies, the essence of life is carried forward through the generations by this very seed. The seed is existence itself. The ancients revered semen as the sacred fluid of the soul, and warnings of its undue loss stretch back to the first recorded physician, the father of medicine, Hippocrates. Hippocrates wrote on the value of semen. Law governs everything. The man's semen comes from all the fluid that is in the body, being the separation of what is most potent. The discharge of such a small quantity in intercourse makes us weak. The most potent and fattest part is separated from the fluid as it foams and passes into the spinal cord. There is a circulation of matter from the brain to the loins, to every part of the body, and to the spinal cord, permitting a flow and ebb of fluid into it and out. The ancient warnings of semen loss and sexual indulgence go back even further to the Bhagavad Gita, written around 400 BC. And this is only one text among many. As such, many of the ancient religions preached the lifestyle of chastity or celibacy. Chastity, sexual relations only in the context of a conjugal relationship. Celibacy, complete abstention from the sexual act. To make use of the sexual faculties outside of procreation was seen as a perversion of nature, and any man who committed such acts was committing a great sin. Such types that were under the controls of sexual desire were seen to be immoral and untrustworthy, something akin to a beast, in that they let their sexual propensities overtake their intellectual reasoning. Mythological figures like the satyrs in ancient Greece portrayed this vividly. Part man and part beast, with exaggerated genitals, a grotesque expression and facial appearance. He was the embodiment of unrestrained lust, and perhaps even a warning as to what becomes of the sexually corrupted man. In the story of Onan in Genesis, we see Onan was instructed to impregnate his deceased brother's wife, and during the act he pulled out and spilled his seed on the ground. As a consequence of this, God struck him down. In Judaism, the weight of this sin was later emphasized in religious writings, which state, "It is forbidden to discharge semen in vain. This is a graver sin than any other in the Torah. It is likened to killing a person." Just as semen was likened to the soul, we can understand that the loss of this substance was a loss of one's spirit. This is why the sages of almost all religions were celibate. They were not expending their energies through sex. They were conserving it, and this builds upon one's character, one's body, and one's spirit. Use of a man's sexual faculties was said to come at great cost to all other faculties of the body. Butler writes on this connection, "Between man's physical and his spiritual nature, there is a perfect line of gradation, from the grosser physical to the higher spiritual, so that the mental and spiritual are wholly dependent upon the physical for their conscious relations to this world, as a house is dependent upon its foundations. We consider the physical body as a chemical laboratory. The food we take into the stomach passes through various stages of transmutation, first becoming chyle, then blood, then seed. The seed, through the action of the same functions, is changed to lymph, a transparent, colorless fluid, properly called spirit water or water of life. The more the seed and fluids are retained in the body without waste, the greater fullness of life, health, and power is experienced. A portion of this regenerated blood passes into the spleen. From thence the most refined elements are taken up through the nerve system into the brain, and there changed into the subtle element of thought potency, giving power to mental action." The ancient mystics saw the Bible differently from how it is read today. It was never meant as a chronicle of external events, but as a map of inner ones. As Christ himself said, "I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." Those that understood the esoteric teachings of the Bible saw it not as a book of stories, but as a manual of man's physiology, coded in allegory. It was said by mystics and occultists that this knowledge in the Bible was hidden in allegory, as such knowledge was considered sacred and perhaps even dangerous. Knowledge that, if expressed outright, would have been banned from circulation. The deeper meanings were said to be reserved for the initiates, and the secrets of man's seed and existence were said to exist within these pages. If the Bible is a manual of man, we learn the fundamental law of man from the Garden of Eden. The esoteric meaning of the forbidden fruit was thought to be illicit sex. God allowed Adam and Eve to live in the garden so long as they did not eat from the tree of knowledge. But they could not resist, and when they ate the forbidden fruit, human suffering was born, and the fall of man began. This is the fundamental premise behind semen retention, that sexual indulgence ultimately leads one to suffering, and sexual abstinence leads us back to the Garden of Eden. Our seed is sacred. It is our connection to the divine. Seed, word, and God are all one and the same creative essence. Every act of creation, from the raising of the firmament to the birth of a child, begins with this seed. It is the Alpha and Omega of existence, the divine spark condensed into matter. The scriptures reveal this mystery in veiled form. Christ said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, small yet containing all potential." Paul wrote, "You are the temple of the living God." Together, these words point to the hidden law. The divine state arises within the human temple through the preservation and refinement of the seed. Carey described the seed as born each lunar month within the body, naturally rising towards the brain to transform into light and wisdom. When wasted through indulgence or lust, that divine current reverses. The oil of God spills from the lamp, and the temple darkens. This is the true fall of man. To fall is not merely to sin, but to lose the power that binds body and spirit. Do you not know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Preserving the seed fulfills the oldest spiritual law, guarding the life force that God breathed into man. When Christ said, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect," he spoke of wholeness, completing the circuit of life within. The saved seed ascends the spine, the straight and narrow way, reaching the higher centers of the brain, where it is crucified and reborn as illumination. The cross is not death, but transmutation, the lifting of the lower into the higher. Every parable returns to this principle. The prodigal son who wasted his substance in riotous living, lost his seed and sought restoration. The wise virgins who kept their lamps full guarded their vital essence. The hidden manna of revelation is this sacred fluid refined into divine nourishment. Salvation is a process within this world, the restoration of flesh and spirit. When the seed is honored and lifted, man becomes whole, the body renewed, the mind cleared, the heart steadfast. He becomes, in Carey's words, no longer man, but God manifest. To waste it is to fall from heaven. To master it is to return. In that return, the Word is made flesh again, and the flesh becomes light. Each story, each miracle described a person within the human body and soul. The crucifixion, the resurrection, the promised kingdom, all were symbols of transformation within. The temple of God was never a building of stone. It was the living body. To know God was to know the workings of one's own nature, for man and the divine were made of the same seed and the same creative essence. As one spiritual text puts it, the Bible says that one part of the body must not exalt itself over another. But if there is any part which may be considered as the foundation, the cornerstone of all bodily and mental powers, of all moral and spiritual greatness, it is the sexual part of our nature. And if this part is abused, if it is put to any use but that for which God made it, and He did not intend that it should be used at all until a man is fully matured, it will bring disease and ruin upon those who thus abuse it, and upon all who disobey the laws which God has made to govern it. The fall of modern man. As long as this sexual passion is thus controlled and perverted, so long will all other forms of depravity be rife, and all forms of virtue be trampled in the dust. In today's modern world, masturbation, sexual excess, and immorality are rampant. All men have instant access to more pornography than they would be able to look at in their own lifetimes, all condensed into a small handheld device. The men of this generation especially are losing their seed with frightening frequency. Today's men are losing the spark of life. It has long been said all through history that masturbation weakens the man, that too much indulgence destroys his nobility, his charm, his good character, and ultimately emasculates him. Look at today's men. They are not the same as previous generations. They are not the same as even the young men of 2 decades before. We are often not told about the weakening effects of sex. In fact, many will argue that sexual indulgence is harmless. To those I pose a simple question. Why does biology show reproduction to shorten life? Aristotle wrote on this. Modern biology writes on this. Animals that engage in reproductive activity generally die sooner. Dogs that are fixed live longer than dogs that aren't. The main biological difference between a man and woman is the reproductive system, and women who don't produce a seminal secretion live longer than men who do. Testosterone production has been found to accelerate the aging process. We see this in the onset of degenerative markers such as balding, a common occurrence among high testosterone men, whereas women rarely bald due to lack of test production. Think about it. Balding is a sign of aging, of deterioration of the organism. The male pattern form, which is most common, comes from AGA, androgenic alopecia, which is caused by an excess of androgens. And androgens are derivatives of testosterone, and testosterone is produced by the testicles. Testicular activity, the very activity that is stimulated during sex and masturbation. When the body is in a constant state of reproduction, it is thought to carry a major burden on the system. The body divides its energy stores between two central processes, that is, reproduction and cell maintenance. And an excess of one comes at the cost of the other. A man practicing semen retention is closing down one of the most major drains of energy to his organism. A man that is not using energy from his sexual economy provides more energy to all other functions and processes throughout his body. Thus ages slower, regenerates faster, looks younger, and overall operates more efficiently than others engaged in sexual activity. The excessive masturbator loses this energy and thus the power to regenerate life. We know with meat that as deterioration occurs, odors appear. We know with pork that the pig in heat produces a certain odor or taint to the meat when slaughtered. This is often reported in the case of the masturbator. The odor which surrounds those addicted to the abuse of the sexual organ is one of the most peculiar in the world. Once the habit of masturbation has become established, the smell is foul, rotten, with an odor resembling that of decayed fish, more than anything else to which it can be compared. Anyone who has once encountered this smell will never mistake it when they breathe it again. Not only in health, but in manner too. The effects of this excessive masturbator are often seen. Here are some of the moral effects upon masturbators of all ages. He is not prompt or bold or resolute or forceful, but timid, afraid of his own shadow, uncertain, waiting to see what is going to turn up, always in a hurry, yet hardly knowing what he is doing or what to do. He does not walk erect, with dignified men, as if conscious of his manhood, neither is he lofty in his aspirations, but moves with a cringing, self-debased manner, as if depreciated and degraded in his own eyes. The above description is from the pen of another, yet we suspect that any degrading practice will ultimately reveal itself in the general appearance of the one who indulges in it. Regeneration. The flame that burns twice as bright only lasts for a fraction of time. The rejuvenation a man on semen retention is said to receive comes from two distinct sources. The first source is conservation, with the body not being drained of energy through the processes of reproduction. Much energy is made available for all the other processes carried out in the body. In this sense, less life energy is being drawn from the organism. This should result in better maintenance of all biological processes, more energy available, and over the long term, less life force drained from the organism. This is replenishment from conservation. The second source of regeneration comes from what is often referred to as the internal secretion. To understand this, simply consider the process of puberty. When the boy goes through puberty, his voice deepens, facial hair grows, his body strengthens, masculine traits develop. This is a result of the seminal secretion he has become able to produce. for without this secretion, none of the manly traits develop, as has been observed in castrates. A masturbator and castrate are similar in that they are both low or absent of these secretions. However, they differ in that a castrate does not burden his system with constant semen production costs, as the chronic masturbator does. That is why a castrate will outlive an intact male, but will still suffer many of the effects of the chronic masturbator, the effeminate effects from a lack of testicular secretions. A castrate, for example, never goes bald, whereas the chronic masturbator is well known for his balding. That phenomenon is well within the social consciousness, as we often associate balding or baldness with being highly sexed or even perverted. Why do people often make the association with baldness and creepiness or pervertedness? Because baldness is a sign of abnormally high testosterone, and this often manifests in an abnormally high sex drive. The first and most profound regenerative benefit of continence and sexual restraint was said to be longer life. Though this isn't accepted in today's mainstream narrative, much of biology actually supports this idea. We know that increased testosterone production increases oxidative stress and accelerates aging. Of course, there are some benefits to testosterone over no testosterone, such as bone health, but these benefits pale in comparison to the overall longevity benefits of those that don't produce it or only produce it in small amounts. Simply look at the castrate, the neutered animal, or female, to see which lives longer in comparison to the semen-producing male. They all do. The castrate and female both live considerably longer than men on average. In fact, a study on Korean eunuchs found them to live 14 to 20 years longer than normal semen secretion producing males of that era. Of course, we do not recommend the path of the castrate whatsoever. The eunuch or neutered animals live longer, yes, but at heavy physiological and psychological costs. Castration leads to deterioration of many masculine traits, both mental and physical. This example is mentioned only in the context of biological longevity, not as a path any man should ever consider. The organ that perhaps benefits the most from the conservation of the testicular secretions is the brain. The testes and brain are often said to be the two most similar organs in the human body. They have the most similar proteins out of any other organs, and many of the biological materials that they require are the same. The connection between intelligence and reproductive health is well known. In fact, we often see significant atrophy of the reproductive system or testes among individuals with dementia or brain injury. It has been hypothesized from this connection that increased activity in one area comes at the expense of the other. That is to say, a man of great intellect must sacrifice much of his sexual energy, whereas a sensual or lascivious man must forfeit much of his mental power. Studies such as those by Dr. Matsumoto in the 1920s have shown that deterioration of the mental faculties is almost always accompanied by a corresponding deterioration of the sexual organs. In patients suffering from dementia praecox and other forms of mental decline, the testes were often found to be shrunken or completely atrophied, showing that when the higher centers of the brain degenerate, the reproductive system follows suit. Conversely, brain injury or degeneration of the nervous system frequently results in arrested spermatogenesis and testicular wasting, demonstrating a profound two-way relationship between the cerebral and the sexual. These findings strongly support the ancient hypothesis that the generative essence, the seminal energy, plays a vital role in maintaining the strength and clarity of the mind. Just as the creative force of the brain is nourished by this conserved energy, its dissipation weakens both thought and will. In the same way, studies on castrated men and animals reveal a flattening of emotion, a loss of drive, and a dulling of intellect, precisely the same effects seen in the chronic masturbator who depletes himself of the very secretion that sustains his vitality. Thus, both science and ancient wisdom converge on this single truth. The decline of sexual power and the decline of mental power are not separate conditions, but two symptoms of the same exhaustion of life force. Many of the world's leading creative or intellectual authorities attributed their intelligence to celibacy or the avoidance of sexual matters. From Da Vinci to Newton, Tesla to Huxley, many of the great men we recognize as geniuses of their time practiced celibacy. And perhaps in the context of this brain-genital connection, we can make more sense of just how these benefits were attained. Semen retention and beauty. Semen retention makes you more attractive. This is an often reported benefit among those on semen retention. While some argue that there is no evidence of this, I have found there to be a variety of sources that can verify this claim. There are pheromones present in male mice that depend on intact seminal secretions, and these chemicals induce sexual attraction from females. When these secretions are absent, as in castrated males, female attraction diminishes or even reverses, sometimes resulting in aversion. This phenomenon, known as the Vandenberg effect, clearly links the presence of seminal secretions to sexual attractiveness. Further studies have reinforced this connection, showing that female mice consistently prefer intact males over castrated ones. So it is by no means a controversial take to see a connection between attractiveness and conservation of the testicular secretions. A man conserving his seminal secretions rather than depleting them would thus likely display signs of this via his pheromonal signals and thus increase the attractiveness a potential female may feel towards him. Many of those on semen retention report in public that females stare at them and make eye contact more often, more intensely, or for longer periods than when releasing. Others have gone as far as to say women will get closer into proximity to them when communicating or even out when in public. Of course, this is only anecdotal, though the previous evidence does lend credence to these claims. Although perhaps not recognized in today's discourse, many of the old writings on masturbation cited frequently the physical effects of the practice, many of which negatively affected the appearance of the individual. One of the most renowned authorities on this subject at the time was Swiss doctor Tissot, who was widely considered the greatest medical bestseller of the 18th century. In his writings on masturbation, he wrote the following: "The first symptoms which occur in those addicted to this practice are, besides those already enumerated, a great loss of strength, extreme paleness, sometimes a slight but permanent yellowness, frequently pimples, which disappear and are constantly replaced by others. They show themselves in every part of the face, but particularly on the forehead, temples, and near the nose. Considerable emaciation, an astonishing sensibility to the changes in the weather, feebleness of sight, and a great prostration of all the mental faculties, particularly of the memory." 18th century Dr. Fowler further illustrated these effects of masturbation in the following writings. "They have a pallid, bloodless complexion, hollow, sunken, and half-ghastly eyes, with a red rim around the eyelids and black and blue semicircles underneath. They appear so haggard, as if worn out, almost dead from lack of sleep, yet unable to get it. If badly impaired, they may exhibit a half-wild, vacant stare, or a half-lascivious, half-foolish smile, especially when they see a female. This is often accompanied by a certain quickness yet indecision of manner, beginning to do one thing, stopping, attempting another, and then returning to the original task. Even in utterly insignificant matters, like deciding where to place a hat. My personal experience does resonate with this description, as at the time I was engaging in masturbation, I became more emaciated, and my skin carried a slight yellow tinge that was almost jaundice-like in appearance. I also felt that there was less attraction between myself and other women in comparison to times I was abstaining. Researchers found that often what a partner is recognizing as attractiveness is really signs of health and genetic fitness. This leaves us with the notion that habits that increase our health markers should in ways increase our attractiveness. Of course, some inherent traits or features of the face may not be so readily curable by sexual abstention, though I would argue that a noticeable improvement in one's visual aesthetics is not only logical but inevitable on semen retention. A retainer is sealing the leaks of his energy loss from sexual activity, so the body will have more to work with to remedy oxidative stress, wear and tear, and improve general maintenance. This abundance of energy a retainer conserves reaches down to the cellular level, where even the mitochondria of the organism are in a more healthy and energetic state due to this surplus. All markers that lead to better health will in some way manifest as more attractiveness. Another aspect that we must consider is androgenic activity. Androgens are produced in testicular secretions. They are a form of testosterone that in excessive amount contributes to androgenic alopecia and hair loss. Androgenic alopecia is often responsible for acne, eczema, and many other conditions of the skin, and this may have a negative impact on one's attractiveness. A man who is constantly producing androgens through excessive activity of the gonads may be more susceptible to these conditions. In fact, in many hair loss and skin medications, the medicine works to lower the libido and thus androgenic activity, which improves the state of the skin. We can see this effect particularly in both finasteride and ketoconazole. In some regions, such as Turkey, acne driven by excess androgens, sometimes associated with conditions like PCOS, is often treated with spearmint tea, as it has been shown to lower testosterone levels, resulting in clearer skin. A man on semen retention is reducing the stimulation of the testes, and as a result is likely reducing androgenic activity. While this connection hasn't been conclusively verified, the evidence is logically compelling and significant. Any unnatural habit is bound to manifest an unnatural consequence, for nature always reveals the man. You cannot live in a state of sexual pervertedness without it coloring your constitution. Your skin is perhaps the most visually recognizable organ of your body, and thus people can get much insight to the quality of thoughts and habits through the appearance of your skin. Masculinity perverted. The connection between excessive sexual activity and effeminacy. If you let the juice out of the gonads, you let the masculinity out of the man. A man who is constantly losing his seed to explicit sexual imagery is vastly overexciting his reproductive glands and nervous system. He is drawing what valuable energy he has into the creation of sperm, energy that is then expelled from his body, leaving him in a state of depletion. This is the very same energy used to maintain every part of the man, especially his secondary male traits, his deep voice, his developed musculature, his strength, and his vitality. It is the spilling of the semen of the male that brings down the stamina of the nations. Nations do not sink until they become effeminate in the sexual habits. Any weakness of the sexual organs debases the man if he is in the prime of his life. After he has passed through this semen-producing age, if the life has been continent and pure going before, he can look forward to a very comfortable and painless old age. This view of society was further solidified by the studies of anthropologist J.D. Unwin in the 1930s, who found monogamous societies to thrive and advance past societies that advocated polygamy and sexual liberation. He who plunged in effeminacy and indolence pampers his senses, occupies himself with lascivious ideas, seeks licentious company and conversations. He it is who will be incessantly driven to debauchery by a more abundant secretion of seminal fluid. It is the degeneration of the male organism that turns it weak and effeminate, and upon the continuation of degenerative activities, the features begin to show signs of this weakness. The first or perhaps most obvious sign of this weakness comes from the two small windows to the brain, that is, the eyes. Soft, languid eyes are an evidence of voluptuousness, or at least of amorous dispositions. In women they assert beauty, and may be the effect of a gentle and affectionate heart, under the influence of a virtuous desire. But in man they are effeminate, and, if united with a protruding mouth and heavy lips, denote a libidinous disposition and a want of manly fidelity. We always think that as long as we have cleaned up after ourselves, that our habits of sexual self-gratification will go by unnoticed. This is perhaps the most common mistake of man. It does not go unnoticed. Excessive sexual indulgence is very visible, and despite most people not recognizing this connection consciously, they often make the connection to degraded appearance and sexual deviancy. That guy looks like a creep. I wouldn't let him around my family. And expressions like this that often stem from an unfavorable physical appearance or particular characteristics of the disposition. The sexually debauched individual does not conceal the truth from others. Nature reveals it to them. This writing from the 1800s takes it further than just effeminacy and places masturbation and sexual excess at the root of man's physical degeneration. Oh, that you may not hear the lamentable histories of these brutish beings, these blasted heroines, whose erewhile, like you, hastened from festival to festival, like you, sacrificing themselves to idols of flesh and bone. Now behold them, these sad victims, such as debauchery has made them. Behold them with wasted body, stupid countenance, an eye without fire, a face without thought. They are there, filthy, ragged, infected, their hair disordered, with drivelling mouth, flabby arms, and trembling limbs. One passes his days crouched in a corner, immovable and mute, soiled by his excremental odours, which he evacuates unconsciously. If you want to be more manly, more attractive, and less effeminate, then avoid the constant loss of your most valuable substance, your semen. If you believe its loss to be negligible, ask yourself, why is it that those organisms, such as spayed animals, castrated men, and females, that cannot extract these fluids, all live longer than the semen-producing and excreting man? As they often say in biology, reproductive activity shortens life, and for men, much of this is tied to gonadal activity. The numerous benefits and their origins. As explained earlier, all of the various benefits that arise from semen retention are a result of two main factors: an increase in life force energy and a decrease in life force expenditure. It takes a lot of energy for the body to make blood, and it takes a lot more blood to make semen. You will find that in the old writings it was said that semen was derived from the bloods. Yet in the modern day it is often said that the semen is not made from blood. To clarify this point, semen is made from the testes, though the testes draw nutrients from the blood to create the semen. So you could say the semen is not made directly from the blood, but of course it is the blood that supplies the nutrients to create this substance. And I believe it was this process that the old writers implied when they said the semen was made from the blood. It was written, "The individual who leads a life of chastity, the nervous system is invigorated and strengthened. The special senses, the sight, hearing, etc., are strong, delicate, and acute. The digestive system is kept normal, and the man knows not what a sick day is. The growth of the body is filled out and rounded, and a full measure of years may come. But old age never, for the last days, in their pleasurable enjoyment of good health and a sound mind, are as were the days of his childhood. The brain is enlarged and perfected. Memory grows strong. The perceptive and reflective faculties increase in power, as shown in the ability to originate and execute the calm, self-possessed strength to endure, and the gentleness, courage, generosity, and nobleness of character. The moral sentiments are elevated. Love grows and ripens, and the soul, in its exercise, reaches up and commingles with the Spirit of God. The reproductive element is preserved in all its life-renewing and life-giving power until full ripeness of years. This is, in part, the difference between a life of licentiousness or semi-continence and a life of strict confidence. Which will ye choose? That God intended the reproductive element in mankind to be used only as a means to propagate the species, no clear-minded, right-thinking man can deny. And when used with any other object, it is a waste of one of the finest and most sacred human powers, subtle essences of the soul's interior presence, and it deserves, as it invariably receives, punishment both prompt and lasting. Written over 100 years ago on the benefits of conserving sexual energy. This energy is primarily a part of man's psychic life. This energy can be disposed of in 4 distinct ways. By systematic, regular exercise, this energy will be taken up by the muscles and converted into physical strength. All the trainers of athletes understand this law. Great physical strength and endurance will result from the conservation of this energy. Many men who have physical defects would receive great benefits and a prolonged life if they would follow this instruction. By habitual thinking and reading along normal lines, this energy will be utilized by the mind and produce intellectual brilliancy. All thoughtful teachers know that pupils who dissipate this energy do not succeed well in their classes. All original thinkers have a strong sexual nature. Intellectual eminence is impossible among those who waste this energy. If all young men knew and practiced this law, they would rapidly improve their mental powers, and this would increase their capacity for service and result in larger remuneration. By habitual loving, sympathizing with, and helping others, this energy will aid in developing the finer feelings, emotions, and sentiments. It is the expression of this energy that brings young people together in courtship, leads to a happy marriage, blends their individualities, harmonizes their differences, and makes them one. Without this energy, these sacred experiences would be impossible. Where young people have lived continent lives, these experiences have been most ideal. Under the false training received in the past, most young people have gotten the idea that love in marriage is inseparable from sexual gratification, and the more frequent, the happier the couple. This is absolutely unscientific. The wasting of the sexual life before and after marriage is responsible for more divorces than all other causes combined. In the past 12 months, I have brought 3 inharmonious couples who were seeking divorce back to marital harmony and happiness. In each case, the parties confessed to sexual prodigality, saw their error, begged each other's forgiveness, pledged sexual temperance, and renewed their vows. They are happy today. Without the sexual life, the love life of courtship and marriage would be utterly impossible. This being self-evident, it follows that the prodigal waste of this energy destroys the very basis of love. This energy is converted into physical strength when retained in the body and directed to the muscles by their proper exercise. This energy is converted into intellectual brilliancy when retained in the body and directed to the mind by proper mental exercise. This energy is converted into sympathy, sentiment, feeling, and love when retained in the body and directed to the emotional nature by the exercise of the moral powers. Would you have a strong body, a brilliant mind, and a glowing, warm, and loving nature? Then you have before you the way of attainment. Would you enjoy this ideal life for many years? Then you have before you the way of maintenance. In order to understand what gives rise to these benefits, let's briefly look at how constant semen loss may cause detriment. It is often argued that ejaculation only uses up minute levels of nutrients, so that the loss is of no physiological significance. The loss, though, has been shown to be quite significant in terms of cellular energy. The body's energy current, adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, is the primary energy character in all living cells. ATP powers vital functions like muscle movement, nerve signals, and the transport of molecules. Without ATP, the body couldn't perform even basic tasks. Cells would stop working, organs would fail, and the life wouldn't be sustainable. Research has shown that sperm requires massive amounts of ATP to be produced. This energy is needed for sperm to move, mature, and perform crucial tasks like fertilizing an egg, which means that producing sperm puts a significant demand on the body's ATP supply. A recent 2025 study emphasized that sperm cells depend heavily on both glycogen breakdown and oxygen-based energy production to generate the large amounts of ATP required for movement and successful fertilization. This high ATP demand from sperm production draws energy away from other bodily functions. As the body prioritizes producing ATP for sperm, it risks depleting energy needed for other vital processes, placing significant strain on the body's overall energy reserves. It is no wonder that this drain of energy is halted through sexual abstinence. There is more cellular energy available to use to maintain cellular processes and bodily repairs. I maintain that everything high and ennobling in our nature springs directly out of the sexual instinct. Its alliance is with whatever is purest and most beautiful in us. To it we owe our love of bright colors, graceful forms, melodious sounds, and rhythmical motion. To it we owe the evolution of music, of poetry, of romance, of belles letters, the evolution of painting, of sculpture, of decorative art, of dramatic entertainment. To it we owe the entire existence of our aesthetic sense, which is, as a last resort, only a secondary sexual attribute. From it springs the love of beauty. Around it, all beautiful arts circle as their center. Its subtle aroma pervades all literature, and to it we owe the paternal, maternal, and marital relations, the growth of the affections, the love of little pattering feet and baby laughter, the home with all the dear associations that cluster around it. In one word, the heart and all that is best in it. It is from abstention of sexual gratification and lustful thoughts that our sexual instinct can return to its most normal state. A perversion of this instinct is a departure from the ways of nature and results in unnatural attributes that manifest themselves in the organism, often in the forms of behavioral and physical deterioration. The constant release of this sexual pressure also weakens the sexual instinct, and it is this instinct which is the origin of much of the aesthetic beauty existing in human and animal. Written in the late 1800s on the power of the sexual instinct. If we look around among the inferior animals, we shall see that the germ of everything which is best in humanity took its rise with them in the sexual instinct. The song of the nightingale, or of Shelley's skylark, is a song that has been acquired by the bird himself to charm the ears of his attentive partner. The chirp of the cricket, the cheerful note of the grasshopper, the twittering of the sparrow, the pleasant caw of the rookery, all these, Darwin showed, are direct products of sexual selection. If we take away from the country the music conferred upon it by the sense of sex, we shall have taken away every charm it possesses, save the murmur of the brooks and the whispering of the breeze through the leaves at evening. Every beautiful voice in wild nature, from the mockingbird to the cicada, is the essence of the love call, and without such love calls, the music of the fields would be mute and the forest silent. Not otherwise is it with the beauty which appeals to the eye. Every lovely object in organic nature owes its loveliness directly to sexual selection. The whole aesthetic sense in animals had that for its origin. Every spot on the feathery wings of butterflies was thus produced. Every eye on the gorgeous glancing plumage of the peacock, the bronze and golden hue of beetles, the flashing blue of the dragonfly, the brilliant colors of tropical moths, the lamp of the glowworm, the gleaming light of the firefly, all spring from the same source. Throughout the animal world, almost every beautiful hue, almost every decorative adjunct is traceable to the action of the sexual instinct. Animals are pleasing to the eye just in proportion to the amount of aesthetic selection that their mates have exercised upon them, and they are most pleasing of all when most sexually vigorous, especially at the culminating point of the pairing season. Thus, even below the human level, we see that the instinct of sex has been instrumental in developing all the finest feelings which the lower creation shares with us or foreshadow for us. The sense of beauty, the sense of duty, parental responsibility, paternal and maternal love, domestic affection, song, dance, and decoration, the entire higher life in its primitive manifestation, pathos and fidelity. In a word, the soul itself in embryo, all rise from the love of the sexes. Human life shows us the same thing in a more advanced development. The tenderest and most pathetic element in life is love. Round it all art, all romance, all poetry circle, The loveliest object on earth for the same and healthy mind is a beautiful girl, a beautiful woman. The loveliest object that art can represent in painting or sculpture is the nude male or female figure. Pure or half-draped, it supplies the base of all ideal artistic representation. Man is beautiful. Woman is beautiful. Both are most beautiful in the budding period and plenitude of their reproductive power. And love, which in itself is the most sacred and beautiful thing in the world, linked on every side with the tenderest affection for father, mother, sister, husband and wife, for son or daughter. Love, thus lovely in its essence, has begotten among us all higher arts and all higher emotions. If we accept these deductions from natural science, and we must do this, we shall see that the sexual instinct has its foundations deep down in nature, and that it cannot, in its right relation, be a low or base passion. If it has accomplished so much, it must in some way be allied to creative power. But it is the chaste relation of the sexes that has done all this, not the unchaste relation. The chaste, wholesome, healthy relation of the sexes can do no harm, always does good. Their unchaste relations have been a curse from the beginning. From unchastity we have our weaklings, our incapable people, our half-made and good-for-nothings, our criminals, liars, thieves, our sensualists and our gluttons, our sexual diseases and our sensuality. These do not spring from a chaste relation of the sexes, but from an unchaste one. To understand the benefits of avoiding lustful thoughts, we must recognize how much our thoughts influence our body's physiology. The intermediary between our thoughts and our physiology is in most cases our glandular systems. We know that thoughts of grief and sadness cause the lacrimal glands to secrete tears. We know that fear or anxiety causes the adrenal glands to release cortisol, which affects heart rate, blood pressure, and alertness. We know that thoughts of food can trigger salivation, and that thoughts and feelings of embarrassment cause blood to rush to the face and blush. It has been said that a similar effect happens to the reproductive system, that when the mind is focused on thoughts of a sexual nature, the testes are activated and start producing sperm. Thoughts can alter our biology, which in turn affects our appearance. I think this is why the criminal often looks like a criminal. The perverted man often looks in many ways perverted. Of course there are exceptions, but for the most part, our inner world is reflected in our outer appearance. So, for the man practicing semen retention, this understanding should make all the difference. Your efforts of restraint do not go by unnoticed. In fact, over time, an abstinent man's physiology begins to change away from the direction his prior lustful self was heading towards. A clean and pure mind will manifest its visual equivalent, and these changes to your biology will have a very large impact on the way the world interacts with you, the opportunities you are presented with, the partners you will meet, and ultimately the destiny you will arrive at. For the sake of your future, the sake of your friends and family, and for the sake of society at large, practice semen retention. You will not regret it. Good luck.